talk about that later on.
Oh.
You have got a fan base here then.
The hype train has left the station.
How old did you say this was?
12 years.
12 years, yeah.
Man, it is good. We just threw all of that on the floor, and this man has no regard for safety. He is not wearing shoes. He could go down while using this.
And John's dead. Wow. That didn't take long at all, but I'm sure he'll come back. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It is another Tuesday night, which means it's time for Weekly Whiskey. We have a super awesome episode that we are recording here in the studio tonight. But before we get to that, John and I have a little bit of bourbon news. So if you're drinking something great, let us know. We have some great drams poured here. Let us know in the chat. We'll be hanging out with you guys as well due to the recorded nature of this episode. But we have something awesome poured. At least I'm excited about what I have. We'll get to what John is drinking here in a moment. But before we get to that, we have a little bit of our bourbon news. So this is going to air a little bit in the future, so I'm going to estimate where we are in the program. We'll have sold through pretty much all of our Jack Daniels, all 3 barrels. We'll have sold through our Old Forester, through the Forester and Flames barrel. On top of that, we'll be deep in our Knob Creek, our new Riff, and then all of our river sets. So Big River Distilling, Riverset Rye, Blue Note Bourbon, as well as the Elijah Craig. I expect that this will come out right about the time I'm at Four Roses. So we will be, I want to say about halfway through the program. We'll be on barrel 25 for the year and looking for barrel number 50 coming up. So I think that will cover my time machine news segment. John, how are you doing?
I like it. I'm doing well, man. You're kind of expanding my mind here really quickly, trying to think into the future as to when this will air compared to when these barrels could be landing. But,
it's all there. Who knows?
I think it'll happen in a way that works out nicely. And if it doesn't, we can just we'll say that we'll edit it and we just won't edit it.
Yeah, this will be a great, I was on a podcast a couple months ago and it was during that whole GME thing. And I was like, today, GME, GameStop stock is worth $350. And then a couple months later, the episode came out and it was worth like 110. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that time.
Oh, cool. So looks like I'm giving sound financial advice.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we're really off, we'll know. And it'll be a fun little oh yeah, perfect. Okay. He was off and this is where in the timeline he was. But
on this day in time,
we have some great whiskey to talk about, my friend.
That we certainly do. I've got a little bit of something poured here. I got the RC6 from a few seasons back and the Maker's Mark limited edition lineup here. What have you got going on there?
I have the FAE01. Yeah,
nice.
FAE01,
I couldn't find wherever I put that tonight. So I just reached back into the old proverbial time capsule here and busted out the RC6.
I like it.
That one.
Tonight's theme is just messing with the timeline of life. Yeah. You're in the past.
Before we get into the timeline of oak and conservation and what Makers is doing, we may as well just mess with the actual timeline of our whiskey world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Change the fabric of time.
All right. Well, I mean, without further ado, I think we should probably just go ahead and crack into this. We've got a fun episode here. Being that this is recorded offline, I know some of our fellow chat members here are going to be a little bit disappointed they didn't get to fire over some real mind grenade questions, but we'll have to field a few in the comments below and we'll get it figured out.
We'll hit a part 2. Part 2 sounds like a good call.
Marvelous. So with us tonight we've got Jason Nally and Kim Harmon from Maker's Mark. We're going to be discussing a project that they've got going on, and before I ramble on about it too much, I'll pull them in, give them an intro, and let's see what they've got to say about something cool that's been coming through the Makers portfolio here.
Yeah,
so, hey, Kim and Jason, how are you guys?
Howdy.
Hello.
It's worth pointing out here that Jason is our star-studded guest and Kim is our very noteworthy addition as well. Very newsworthy. So thank you tonight for joining us, guys. It's great to have you.
Glad to be here.
I'll let Jason go first because, he's our little natural resources guru. So
I, too, am sipping on some FAE as well. So cheers to that. And
great choice.
That definitely one of the best benefits of working at Maker's Mark is being able to have the first crack at the wood finishing series as they roll out. So there's always buzz starting to churn around there when we know that it's going to hit the shelf. And
nice.
I have a couple of bottles that I'm holding on to of each of them so far. And if you get a chance to try any of that community batch that was floating around there for a while, that's some excellent liquid as well too. So, but yeah, I'm Jason Nally. I talk a lot. Kim definitely is more humble than I am, so I will probably point to her every now and then to let her highlight some of the stuff she's working on, because she's got some awesome projects in the works too.
That's great. So Kim, you want to go ahead and give us the nickel tour of what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm Kim Harmon. I work on sustainability at Makers. Jason and I are kind of, he's on the farm and I am in operations. So we complement one another in a very nice way. Love working with Jason, but we have two very different wheelhouses, but both are equally important in what we do. And we work at a fantastic place that's very different than most, because we have the farm, and Jason does some fantastic things. And then there's me, who, like I said, I have the not sexy stuff on a daily, but I love it. And it's what I do. So between the two of us, I think that we get a lot accomplished at Makers. So
I love that. So for our listeners here, so by the not sexy, what does that entail? And kind of like on a day by day.
Oh, not sexy. We are, when we are looking at energy conservation and water conservation and waste reduction, all of that we do, making sure that water that we use, that we return to a body of water very close to us, is in the state that it should be. And Jason very much protects our natural resources. And for me, it's making sure that anything that we take away, that we give back appropriately. So we have, like I said, we're in two different wheelhouses, but we work together and we complement one another in a fantastic way. But as always, Jason gets all of the glam, and he's Mr. Sexy. My stuff never gets, there's never a press release on what I do. It's always Jason is out there planting a tree or doing something, and then there's Kim. But honestly, in all honesty, Jason and I both do a lot of things that are very important to the bourbon industry, very different from one another, but it takes both of us to make it work.
Oh, I love it. That's great. I like the dichotomy here. So Jason, what's a day in the life for you look like? I'm curious to see how it compares to Kim's appraisal of your.
It is hard to tell. So just for instance, today I spent most of the day planting and securing apple trees for an orchard that we're developing on site. So definitely not directly related to the manufacturing of world-class bourbon. However, it's definitely helping to reduce our carbon footprint as far as where we ship in apples to make delicious cocktails for Star Hill Provisions, which, a typical day for me, especially this time of year, is helping to support the culinary team, the cocktail program there at Star Hill Provisions through, we have about an acre garden that's in ground that we call the production garden. And over the next couple of weeks, in probably mid to late May, we're going to be starting out with a raised bed garden there as well. That's about a little over 2,000 square feet. So that's kind of some day-to-day stuff I do this time of year. But a couple of days ago, I went out with some of the research team, and we went and collected tissue samples out of the top of an oak tree. So I mean,
Cool.
Who knows what I'm going to do from day to day? It's ever changing, which is pretty exciting in itself.
I love it.
Like it. That's great. Right. Also known as sexy. Yes. So we get a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what you might do on the day to day. Let's dig real quick into a little background. Give us sort of a snapshot of what brought you to where you're at, whether it was through love of conservation or the wild or whiskey. I mean, whatever it is that sort of brought you to where you are, give us the abbreviated version of that journey. Go ahead with it, Kim.
Always loved science, big science nerd. Loved it. Went and did my background in biology, and then ended up doing a lot of outreach programs. Ended up in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda,
Oh, wow.
Chile, studying both sustainable farming and the marketability of game meat in East Africa. So I just got kind of on that sustainability bandwagon. Found myself in the bourbon industry and thought, there's a place for me here. It's not really made yet, but I'll find my mark there. And this is my 26th year in the bourbon industry. I have worked for several of our competitors, and I've been with Maker's Mark now and love it. Absolutely love it. Feel like it took me 26 years to get to here, and have a great group of individuals around me, people like Jason, who they make me excited to come to work every day.
That's great. So I also noticed that you said you travel basically the entire world and you get to deal with wild game, and somehow Jason is doing all of the sexy stuff, huh?
My sexy stuff is over. I feel like that, yeah, I did really cool things when I was younger, and now I'm very much based on our effect on climate change, how we're making sure that we're giving back. I'm a sustainability chick who thinks sustainability is not just about environmental impact, it's about community as well. So I'm very involved in that as well. And I look at what Jason does, and then I look at what I do, and it's like there's so much to sustainability that people don't truly understand. So our impact on our community is something that Jason and I both focus on. So yeah, I've done some really cool things in my past, and I honestly have to say some of the coolest things I've ever done are happening right now. So.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's circle back to those things, and we'll tie them into how what you're doing is still probably fun and sexy. But Jason, go ahead and let us know sort of your brief history here. Give us a snapshot, if you would.
Yeah, snapshot. I'll try. Yeah, anytime I say that, I like to talk. So
go right ahead.
I grew up. So the farm I grew up on was a beef cattle and tobacco farm. Was directly adjacent to the Maker's Mark property. So I was born there, raised there, and I thought, to be honest with you, that every man, woman, and child and all across the world grew up beside a whiskey distillery. I don't think I realized how special that it was to grow up beside Maker's Mark Distillery. I had family who's worked there since even before it was Maker's Mark. So it was just kind of so embedded in the community. I didn't even think to work there. But as a kid, I would legally or illegally spend a lot of time across the fence on Maker's Mark property around that awesome lake and through Whiskey Creek and Hardins Creek that flows by the distillery, and spent a lot of time in the forest and the fields and the water, and definitely developed a love for those natural resources. So whenever I grew wings and flew out of Loretta, Kentucky to go to school, I pursued a degree in wildlife biology. So after graduating from college, I spent a lot of time as an educator. I also spent some time working for the USDA and our state fish and wildlife agency here in Kentucky. And so for most of my career, around 15 years or so, I've been a professional wildlife biologist. About 5, 6, 7, no, hell, it's been probably 8 years ago. Maker's Mark started, looking for partners to help build this program that they had there on their property. And being a Marion County native, growing up right adjacent to the distillery, and then working for the state fish and wildlife agency, they brought me on board just as a consultant. That was part of my job at Fish and Wildlife at the time. And basically, over the course of about 3 or 4 years, I worked with them to develop so many projects that they had to hire someone on to manage them. And then I applied for that job instantly, and it helped out that whenever I went into the interview panel, I probably knew the property as well, if not better than anyone sitting in there. So yeah, that's my story.
Man,
perfect.
Yeah, that's a good booster for setting yourself up for the job. As being the subject matter expert is a good way to go.
It helps.
So recently, the University of Kentucky and Maker's Mark have partnered for the largest American Oak repository. And I'm curious, what is an American Oak repository? I work in software. Repository is a very well-known phrase for people who write computer code and stuff. But what does it mean for the conservation and wildlife biology side of life?
Well, I'm going to break that into a couple different pieces and what you on it. So The term repository really is based off of a project that we started at the distillery 2 years prior, where we set about with our partners at Independent Stave Company and the University of Kentucky, and we decided that we are going to map and sequence the white oak genome. It hadn't been done before, and we realized how many important things we might be able to pick up from that knowledge. I mean, just look at human health and all the advancements that we've seen just by mapping and sequencing our genome. And really, there was a lot of what if situations there. What if a disease moves into the United States that starts systematically wiping out white oak? What if there's an insect that comes into the United States and starts systematically wiping out white oak? What all tools do we have available? What all tools can we gather to be able to hopefully be able to stymie that type of collapse? Because if we lose white oak, we lose bourbon, we lose tequilas, we lose rum, so on and so forth. So, I mean, from a corporate standpoint, it hit a lot of different brands that, that we can help the white oak. We're going to help out a lot of the distilled spirits industry. So, flash forward to about a year or so after that, the partnership with UK continued, and that we decided that, well, we need to have all of this geographical variance, which it's all Quercus alba. There's not different variations of Quercus alba, but there's geographical differences. So a white oak tree in Mississippi versus a white oak tree in Michigan, you're probably going to see a lot of different growth characteristics, probably different flavors, probably different usefulness in a barrel. So through the University of Kentucky's genome team and their team that looks at genetic improvement, but species improvement, they set about contacting with like state forestries, the National Forest Service, universities throughout the white oak range, and we've started collecting acorns throughout that range. So they'll bring those into the nursery setting there here in Kentucky at the Division of Forestry's nursery, and they'll hand pick out which trees are coming up that's showing the best characteristics out of each one of those sample locations. And there's going to be about 300, give or take. And so they bring about 15 to 20 of each one of those simple sample sites, and we're planting them out on a 19.5, 20-acre piece of property that we have here on Star Hill Farm.
Wow, incredible.
It's a very, very long-term position. So this is a research project that will last 100 years, because, that little acorn that fell out of the tree this past fall and started sending its taproot down into the ground, it's going to be 90 years before that can be utilized for a barrel. So, and while the forest conditions are good right now, we have a lot of standing timber in the forest, so no need to be immediately afraid. But as we look at the understory and those trees that are kind of in that middle layer of the forest, there are some concerns about what is it that's causing these trees to not make it up to the canopy. And there's a whole list of things that have been identified, but being able to withstand growing in shady conditions is one of those things. So if through this tree improvement program, if we can start finding trees that grow well in shade, and say you live in Georgia and your Georgia forestry department has a white oak nursery, why wouldn't you be growing out the best white oaks that you possibly can for that? So we're not tinkering with genetics or any of this type of thing. One of the toughest things that we've had to answer is that we're not creating GMO trees or anything like that. This is the same type of plant breeding and plant selection that's been going on since, if you remember in middle school with that little Mendel's P theory where you were looking at the X's and the Y's and all that stuff. I mean, it's the same type of thing. We're not splicing genes or anything here. We're just trying to learn as much about the tree as we possibly can.
Okay, that's good to know. So Jurassic Park American Oak Edition is not something we need to concern ourselves with.
No.
Okay.
But I mean, we are specifically looking what are the best and brightest trees in those forest systems where we're collecting. I mean, if you've got a little scraggly tree, we're not going to want you. We want the best. And that's one of the issues that we see is that whenever a lot of times in forestry forestry practices, they will take out some of the best genetics in the forest and they leave behind poor genetics. So part of this tree improvement program is to actually be able to go back in. So say you went into an existing forest, you could take some of these better genetics trees from that particular geographic location, put them in there. They're going to start mixing with the other trees that are already there present, and your offspring from that is going to be a much better tree.
Sure, that makes sense. And you hit on a point that I think is really valuable. People assume that American oak and white oak is only immediately valuable for the bourbon industry, and that's clearly not true. John and I are both huge fans of different agave spirits and rum spirits, and we're seeing those barrels even as they migrate over to Scotland after being used for making bourbon. The tale of American oak doesn't just end when it stops being a bourbon barrel. It goes on and affects so many other supply chains. So it's super important to kind of safeguard that, not supply chain, but that entire process goes beyond just bourbon itself.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the economics of white oak just in our county alone, which is a pretty rural part of central Kentucky, I mean, in our county, we have Maker's Mark Distillery, we have Independent Stave Company in their main cooperage, and we also have an oak flooring manufacturer right there. And so, I mean, whenever Kim and I we're putting together these plans, I mean, we are altruistic. I mean, we're doing this for the good of ourselves, but we're also doing it for the good of bourbon, for the good of the local economy as well. And I think that Independent Stave and UK, they all have that same belief system in that.
Okay, cool. So Independent Stave is also a pretty big player in this, it sounds like.
Independent Stave, some of the best partners that you could ever possibly imagine. And I mean, it helps that they've been building barrels for us for a very long time, and they're 10 miles down the road from us. So, when you're from a small town like this, everybody knows everybody, and we really love the Independent Stave folks and the Boswell family for sure.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and I mean, conservation hits very close to home. John, especially as an upland hunter, we released a whistle pig earlier this year named after the whistle missile to go ahead. We're going to do some charity initiatives in the future for the woodland grouse. I'd say this every time and I mess it up. So I'm definitely the non-sexy pair here.
Rough Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society are two things that kind of hold a dear place in my heart, just from being a lifelong hunter. And, there's no animals without habitat. I mean, much like there's no white oak sustainability without understanding, the work that you guys are doing and planting trees, studying these trees. I do actually want to circle back and talk about the MM1 tree. But that's just like a sticky note there that's on the side of my brain. But yeah, the overall, just like the procedures that have to be in place and the amount of things that need to be done for conservation to actually be more than just a word on a press release, or be more than just a buzzword at a conference where you're trying to raise a few bucks. There really is a big chunk of where the rubber meets the road, and that hard work is what you guys are doing now, and I really like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, white oak from a wildlife standpoint, is the most important tree in the eastern United States of America, bar none. I mean, and that's from the iconic charismatic game species that we all know, anything from wild turkey to a deer. But then if you look at pollinator species, caterpillars, like those type of things, the basics of a lot of the food chain, and a lot of the important things that makes all the flowers and stuff that are really pretty to look at. You can thank a white oak for that. You can thank a white oak for water quality. You can thank a white oak for so many things other than just this deliciousness here,
Sure. Well, I mean, just the mast crops alone that are going to grow and feed all the other smaller animals. It'll feed the other. I mean, there's a mass amount that goes on there, sort of behind the scenes. I mean, it's not really behind the scenes for you guys. It's sort of right in the front of what you're doing. But for folks like Jay and I, who, we kind of have it as a tertiary part of our life, it's sort of something that's a little bit more easily forgotten. So, like I was saying, I want to circle back to the mother tree that you guys had. I mean, in the press release, this is something that kind of jumped out at me, that you have this tree that's like over 300 years old.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. So, I mean, the tree is very, very, very old. I will commit to that. It's very, very, very old. The only way that we could really know for sure is to go in and do an incremental borer on it and count the rings. The tree is very old, and it's seen a little bit of damage here and there over the years. And so while incremental boring is not necessarily a terrible thing for trees, I mean, you can do that, the tree will heal over, but we don't want to take any chances of this tree. It's too important to us. It's too important to science. So we're just going to guess that it's somewhere between 300 and 500 years of age. But we know that it's been around through droughts. It's been around through windstorms. It's been around through lots of different things that forest has experienced, and it's thrived and survived. So it checked all the boxes for things that we were looking for to be able to basically map out the white oak genome. And if it ever produces acorns again, which I hope it does, we're definitely going to be collecting some of those, and they'll go into the repository as well.
Okay. That feeds into a really great question I had. And I think that this we'll see if this falls in Kim's wheelhouse. But so you're collecting over 300 samples. That's like quite an undertaking. Like 300 is a big number. What are you guys looking for? Specific traits and qualities, like regional areas? What kind of management is going into whether something makes it into your 300 samples, or are you just grabbing any oak you can find? Like, I'm kind of curious about the driver for a subject size that's like that wide.
I mean, availability is the biggest thing. So, I mean, being able to find a tree in a varying geographic location that's producing acorns, and we get the chance to, and someone gets the chance to collect them. I mean, this is definitely a big multi-pronged project with tons of volunteers throughout multiple states. So, last year happened to be a dud year for white oak production in the state of Kentucky, but Arkansas had a great year. So they were able to get almost all of the geographic locations in Arkansas and a bunch in Tennessee that they've already got collections of. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look for, Indiana and Ohio, and the University of Kentucky is definitely leading this. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like just Kim and I are just sitting around like on the horn all day long collecting, finding people to collect acorns. I mean, I got to give the props to the folks there, and that's the important thing. Like, just like Kim and I was saying, I mean, we have our own lanes. Kim's excellent at what she does. I'm good at what I'm passable at what I do, and we know our lanes. So basically, we're not going to become geneticists overnight. We're not going to become tree improvement experts overnight. We're not going to become orchardists overnight. So we've reached out and developed these partnerships with the University of Kentucky and their folks, and with Independence Stave and their folks, to pull these stuff together. So I got to give some props to those folks as well.
Interesting. Totally. And it's interesting because, like, we're a big collective of enthusiasts. John and I, and enthusiasts everywhere are known for finding products that are unavailable in one part of the country and mailing them to their enthusiast counterparts in another part of the country. Like, John and I do that concept with whiskey, but that is honestly the first time I've heard of someone doing it with acorns.
Yeah, and they're still looking for sample sites. So I mean, if any of you, if somehow, some way you want to connect to any of the folks that are listening to this, to me, I can put them in contact with Laura DeWald with the University of Kentucky. And what she's doing is she's just sending out packets to folks throughout the range, especially in the ones where she's really interested in finding collections. And you mail them to her, and they throw them out in the nursery, and hopefully in a year they're going to pull them out, and they'll come live on Star Hill Farm for 100 years until we make barrels out of them.
Interesting. I wonder what the market for Wisconsin acorns is. I'll have to reach out. Are we like? Is this something, off the top of head? Is Wisconsin like known for breeding good acorns?
No, yours are not desirable. They actually specifically stated no Wisconsin.
I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's white oak up there for sure. And I mean, if you look at if you look at modeling, what it's going to look like in another 50 years, we're probably going to see a shift of white oak into closer to the Canadian border. And that's part of the tree improvement program, is that, as we start seeing the climate changing, I mean, what variabilities that cause white oak to grow well in Tennessee might become very, very, very important to white oak that's now growing in Ohio or whatever it may be. So that's part of that tree improvement program, and the 100-year vision behind it is that we're looking at those things. And it's probably one of the biggest challenges for Kim and I, is to try to set our sights that far ahead and come up with projects that are meaningful.
Okay, interesting.
All right.
I wondered if like the Wisconsin acorn just like had too high a blood alcohol content or something. And
it may.
Too high of a
so
cheese and broth content.
Yeah.
The only way that you can get them to germinate is in an old fashioned.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, made with brandy.
So in 100 years, like you're talking about, what is, and maybe you guys have a separate take on this. I'm kind of curious if there's a unified goal, but what is, in 100 years, if this project's been successful, what is the landscape of American oak looking like?
It's still there, and it's in a quantity throughout its native range where we can still go in and utilize it for all the benefits that white oak provides for so many different industries and recreational pursuits. And it's, we're leaving the world in a better place than what we found it. I mean, I think that's anything that Kim and I are working on is all based around that.
Yeah, and for me, it's all about when Jason does what he does, I'm capable of doing what I do. And that means that we can continue operations and we can put cases out the door, and we are not having a negative impact on our community. So, the two of us work together in very different fashions. However, what we do is, it's equally important. And, Jason, some of the things he didn't mention is like your watershed protection. Jason's reached out to me before and he's like, I need more people to sign up to take samples within this community to check the water in their neighborhood. And then they report this to the state. And I'm like, I've never even heard of it before. And this is something Jason's done. And now I have a son who lives 80 miles from here who checks water in his neighborhood, who never did it before. And that's something that Jason brings to the table. So I think things like that are important, and we get our employees involved in these type of initiatives. We get signups and making sure everyone has the skills and the tools and the resources they need to do this in their community. So it branches out farther than just Maker's Mark. It's the local, it's the county, and then that transfers over to like a tri-county area. And before you know it, we're making a big impact on the state of Kentucky. So
that's really cool.
I mean, experiencing Star Hill Farm itself is just a great thing. And we're definitely trying to do the best we can to open that up to more and more visitors each year. But I mean, I was in the conservation field for a long time as I wore the patches on my shoulder. I was part of the government. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. That's always the thing that everybody wants to hear. But yeah. So, I mean, we would have these great programs. We bring landowners out. We do this awesome outreach and educational type of things. But one thing I saw over the course of a decade or so in that was that I started seeing the same faces over and over and over again. One unique thing about working in the bourbon industry now is that I get to reach out to people who would have never showed up for a forestry workshop there. They're showing up to talk about the flavor of bourbon and how much oak influences the flavor of bourbon. And really, it's just a couple more sentences, and you can start that dialogue talking about the conservation of the, of the species. And so it's really rewarding whenever we have groups of bartenders or restaurant owners or whoever it may be, bourbon groups come down. If I get a chance to spend 20, 30 minutes with them, I don't expect them to walk away being expert foresters or wildlife biologists, but whenever they interact with other people and they're introducing people to the brand or they're introducing people to bourbon in general, that they'll have a few more talking points other than just the, whatever they're getting out of their tasting notes. They'll be able to talk about the story of that acorn to barrel too.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of fun because we always, we hear people talk about from grain to glass with bourbon, right? Like, everyone just kind of encompasses the fact that whiskey starts as a grain, but really, I mean, it really starts as an acorn, right? Because you don't get whiskey without the barrel, and the grain, grain grows every single year, but oak takes far, far longer to come into, being usable. Do you guys notice, are other distilleries noticing this and kind of picking up the charge? Are they kind of joining, or are you guys kind of still the front runner in this respect for the specific project?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to seem braggadocious or anything, but I mean, I definitely think that we've definitely led the charge in a lot of these conservation, things. But I mean, there's a lot of inertia, I feel like, throughout the whole bourbon industry right now, especially with some of the more established brands, to where they're finding their wheelhouse. They're seeing how they can help, with the overall goals of sustaining the white oak forestry. And there is a collaborative effort going on called the White Oak Initiative that's doing a lot of really awesome stuff throughout the white oak range. And we try to participate with them the best we can. That just with us, one of the things we identified as being a key asset for this journey for us is that we have a big ass farm. Oh, sorry, I cussed, but
no, please.
Okay. But we have over 1,000 acres, which a lot of distilleries don't have that. So one of the things we identified pretty early on when we knew that we wanted to take on some of these challenges was, how do we best utilize our assets that we already have? We're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. We already have an existing forest on our property. We already have, we've been purchasing land to be able to buy the watershed that feeds into our lake. What are we going to do with those properties whenever we buy them? And whenever we started having these conversations, that's whenever a lot of these long-term 100-year vision type of research and land management projects started coming into fruition.
That's very cool. So, not to quote you directly, but you mentioned you have a big farm. So, on your big fucking farm, I think, or maybe you said
I think it's what
some
he
other
said.
way. Some other
Yeah.
way.
It's on the record that
So
way.
besides oak, and you were talking about, I think it was apples earlier. What else are you guys growing? I'm I'm really curious. Are you guys growing all sorts of fruits and vegetables? Or what give us a quick TLDR on what we can expect to see on the farm.
So we
Jason, go ahead and tell all those sexy damn things.
so we do we just are in the early stages of developing an orchard there on site, and that's very early stage. Like, it's gonna be 3 years before we ever get to pick the first thing. But we do have beef cattle there on site that we utilize for our restaurant. As far as bourbon in itself, we do grow some barley there on the farm, and wheat. Part of that wheat project is some of I'm sure you all know Jane Bowie. She works alongside of Brian Mattingly, who's my direct supervisor, and some of the other folks there, Kim as well, to looking at wheat varietal testing too. That's another big thing that we're really proud of. Right now we have about our one main infield crop, and then we have 25 different varietals that we're testing out there, and we're looking for the same things that any agricultural university is looking for in new varieties of wheat. But probably the most important thing for us is the flavor of the wheat. So we can do a lot of the things that Margie Samuels did back in the day and just make loaves of bread of it, out of it, and get some really good. What is this going to taste like? How might it perform? And then we can kind of take some of our favorite ones and grow them out in a bigger field type of situation. And I think that we're going to stick with wheat just because that's so iconic to Maker's Mark, being a wheated bourbon. But I can see that same type of stuff moving on towards corn and stuff like that in the future.
Okay, very cool.
Is corn sexy? I don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah,
corn sexy.
That sounds pretty sexy to me, I guess. I don't know what the standards are really like around here, anyways. If that was being recorded live right now, I feel like chat would be on fire. Kim, what is the genome process or project rather? What does that look like for you guys in your role anyway? 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, sort of short term, in so much as this is a 100-year project. What does this look like for you guys on the sustainability side?
Well, everything we do, none of it is short term. Everything we're doing is long term, which kind of goes into play with that whole 100-year vision that Jason's working on and that Makers in general is working on. A lot of the things that I'm doing, I'm never going to see come to fruition. I'm a 47-year-old chick who hopes to retire one day, and but we're looking at creating an energy independent facility where we're self-sustaining and that we are creating energy through our byproduct. So we everything I do, I have that entire life cycle approach, which is just like what Jason does. So I think we're creating a fantastic bourbon, and that what our waste is, how can we use that to incorporate that right back into the cycle. So everything I do, I have a life cycle approach. We do not want to be contributing to landfills. We're doing waste to energy all over the plant. Our goal is, how can we get back to the community? So how can we not only create enough energy to sustain our facility, but how can we give back to those around us? So everything we do, the same thing with Jason and the Genome Project, it's this long-term vision. We don't have short-term goals. We may have some, end-of-year goals so that Jason and I can continue to get paid. But we also have those big visions so that, maybe one of my kids or one of my grandkids can say, my mom worked at Maker's Mark when they still use natural gas to supply their boilers, but see what they do now. And, Jason's got little kiddos. And I mean, I'm hoping that one day somebody talks about this and everything that we've done to make it better. And we are not perfect, but every day we challenge to be better. And that's kind of that's kind of the mindset I have, because people don't like to kind of shine their goals because they're like, we're not perfect. Dude,
Right.
let's celebrate better. We are better than we were yesterday. And that's what we strive every day at Maker's Mark. And that's not just me or Jason. That's everybody on that campus. And that's the important part, that you'll have a maintenance man who'll come up to me and he'll be like, he has shredded cardboard. And he's like, you know, Kim, I received a pump today and it was wrapped in this cardboard. And why do we send something out and it's wrapped in plastic? Why aren't we doing it different? And I'm like, this guy never knew recycling. And now he's bringing ideas to me. That's what it's all about. And that's what Jason and I are trying to do, is to do the right thing and bring everybody along for the ride with us. And, you know, it trickles down. You know, my kids don't understand what it's like for their neighbor to throw a banana in the garbage can. And they'll come, you know, they would come home and go, you know, so-and-so throws stuff in the garbage. They don't compost. And, you know, that's what we want to teach our employees, so they teach their kids. So it's a community effort. And Jason's way better at this than I am. Don't get me wrong, but I try to be as
I disagree.
good. Jason's the hippie, and I'm the nerd. So that's what we try to do on a daily, and we try to bring everybody along for the ride. It's a journey, and we're not perfect, but we're getting better, and we challenge each other on a daily basis to be better. Okay. I think that's important.
Well, and it's worth noting too that after doing things one way for like 100+ years, you know, you don't get change in a second, but you know, every little effort adds more momentum going forward. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, a mantra of constant change is great.
Yep.
Jay, which one of us is the hippie and which one's the nerd?
Oh fuck, dude.
Jason is so the hippie and I'm the nerd.
I feel like you're more. I think a case could be made, because we both work in IT. Like that's usually kind of like the stickler, right? Like, oh, he's in IT, he's a nerd.
True.
I wear a lot more tie-dye, I think, which is like a mark against me, but a mark in favor of the hippie. Yep. I did have really long hair for a while.
Have you been to fish shows?
Oh
no.
Okay. So, I mean, that's just a grade of hippie. That's not means like you're all in. That's just
I'll say I've been to a non-zero amount of fish shows, and I've spent a lot of time being serenaded by Dave Matthews. So
okay. Well, he's playing in Kentucky this fall, so you need to pack your bags and come down to the Railbird Festival.
I'll be there.
Only Jason would know that. That is not released news. Only Jason knows that.
Okay.
I'm from
on the hippie Facebook group.
I'm in Kentucky, so I mean, you know, we got My Morning Jacket. That's our Louisville band, so they're headlining the festival. So that's how I know about it.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, yeah, it sounds like of the John Jay duo, I'm on the hippie side of things, and John's a resident nerd. But
I always knew you were a hippie.
I'm on that hippie dippy bullshit, man. I love it.
Classic. Guys, this has been really good. I feel like we could talk about really any piece of that press release for any number of hours, and I could find ways to tie it back into hunting or booze. And I mean, it's just all around a really cool project. It's something I wish that I could like have a portal into this and like see snapshots of it along the way. Do you know if there's going to be more news about this? Like, is there a way that somebody could follow along with this a little bit closer?
I don't know. Probably through our social media accounts. I mean, for sure. I mean, I don't know. We did that one big press thing. I don't know if we'll do something every single year on it. I kind of doubt that we would. That's not really our style. So
100 years of press.
Yeah, like every year it's like, damn it, it's Earth Day again. All the shit they're talking about that damn tree again.
You know what's coming.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, that's just what we're doing now. I mean, we're going to continue that project, but I mean, you know, Kim's got some stuff coming up in the works this next year that I think will get some pretty significant press too. So,
definitely, this is the only project you guys are going to do for the next 100 years, right?
No, it's not. We're not one trick ponies. We got to reinvent ourselves. Like Kim said, you know, this is long term stuff, and some of the goals that the team has said. I mean, we're obviously very proud of, but I mean, if it helps us sell whiskey, that's even an added bonus for us.
Absolutely. And it's so nice, when you get to go to work every day and you work with cool people. Even though we weren't cool in high school, we're so cool now. So between Jason and I, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's a great quote to live by. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, guys, we are rolling up on the top of our hour here. We're so thankful to have had both of you join us. If people are looking for more information, we talked a little bit really briefly, social media. So if they want to find more about Maker's Mark, makersmark.com. Obviously, you guys are on every form of social media that's ever existed under.
Do we got a TikTok account?
I want to.
I don't know.
I don't know
I don't
either.
even know. Do I have a TikTok account? I think I do.
I don't have a TikTok. I know that.
I do know that I have a TikTok account, but it's sorely underutilized.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just that fragment just entered my brain.
You must have one. I
No,
feel like
no, it's good. Normally at this point we're like, okay, tell us where we can find you. And I realize that like they're probably not going to be like, Jason at Maker's Mark on Twitter, but
No.
we want people to stay on top of this stuff. We love seeing these press releases. It's always fun. So Jason and Kim, thank you again so much for your time tonight.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great to have you. Great taste. Obviously, that FAO one is great. But if you're looking for more from us here at Weekly Whiskey, catch us on Tuesday and Thursdays for episodes. After Hours drops on Thursday mornings. If you're looking for more from John, he's at the Bourbon Finder. And I'm Jay from WhiskeyRaiders.com, where your Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey. Once again, guys, this has been a blast. We love seeing all the things that go on behind the scenes that keep bourbon awesome and will keep bourbon awesome for decades to come. So thanks again, guys, and cheers. It's been great to have you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.